Hey guys, today we're going to talk about putting a budget lift on a Ford Explorer. It also works with a Ford Ranger. I'm going to give you a few pictures of my experience and hopefully it'll give you some helpful hints. Stay tuned at the end. I'll give you my opinion of the performance of my Explorer after this and any changes that I've done. Here's my Explorer. It's a 2000 Eddie Bauer. It's in really good shape, and I purchased it to go camping and get up in the mountains. And so just like all of us, I had to start somewhere. Didn't have a ton of money, and so the torsion twist and shackle lift was definitely on the list. Here's a shot of the Explorer after I did the torsion twist and the rear shackle install with the stock tires. Here's a shot of it with the lift, 33-inch tall tires, and I started to do some of the trimming of the plastics. Here's a shot of the Explorer after installing the lift with the 33s, and you'll notice that I also took off the rear bumper and the front valance and side skirts to give it a better appearance. Let's start with the rear shackles first. It was pretty straightforward. Getting the bolts out of the rear spring bushing was the hardest part. Matter of fact, really hard. And I used a Sawzall to cut the bolts off and pounded it out with a hammer, and it was pretty difficult. I eventually had to replace the bushing completely because they were in pretty bad shape. So just be prepared for that. But it was pretty straightforward. Here you see the shackles I purchased. It's been so long I can't even remember for sure who I bought them from, but an internet search will bring up multiple places where you can get them. These were really heavy duty and had powder coating, and so I chose those. Here's a close-up shot of the shackles installed. It gave about 1.5 inches of lift in the rear, and this is showing the stock tires. All right, next up is the front. I did a lift called a torsion twist, and there's lots of information out there on the web about it. Basically, you turn the torsion bar adjustment screw in, which tightens up the torsion bar and gives you lift. All right, here's some helpful hints with this. Make sure that you jack the truck off the ground completely. That will relieve the torsion bars as much as they can, which allows the bolt to turn a lot easier. If you live in a rusty climate, my recommendation is that you spend a few days before you do this with some PV Blaster lubing up those bolts, because they are known to strip out. I've done it myself. Make sure you use a 6-point socket on there. I've actually stripped the head off of one. I do those adjustments in quarter turns. That way you can count them. Righty-tighty is the way you want to go in for lift. And make sure in the beginning you take a tape measure and measure the front fender opening somewhere, which you can repeat. That way you know how much lift you've given, and that it's actually the same on both sides. You'll probably find that one side or the other is lower or higher than the other as it sits now. So you're cranking in, getting some lift, and you want to get 3-4 inches of lift. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not the way it works. Mine went up about 1.5 inches before I started getting horrible ride characteristics. You'll hear that mentioned over and over again. And if you go too high, basically the shock is topping out in its travel. And so every bump you hit, it will go down a little bit and then come up and bang into the top of the suspension travel, and that makes your ride horrible. So you may have to go back under and adjust it a little bit to get that to go away. I also recommend running a really good shock. I ran RS 9000s XLs, which are adjustable, and I would put them on the max adjustment for stiffness, and that pretty much calmed that down. I at one point wore out a set of those Ranchos and went with the Bilsteins, and that was a big mistake. The Bilsteins were horrible for that type of thing. Maybe they're speed sensitive and they work better in other circumstances, but they were too soft and they would top out constantly. All right, well, here it is finished. Here's a shot of my Explorer with 265/75/16 tires on there. Like I said earlier, I gained about 1.5 inches lift, so it turned out pretty well. With the 265 tires, I didn't get any real fender scraping in the front. At full lock, the tire would just touch the inner fender well, but not real bad, and it didn't tear up a tire, so I ran it like that for a little while. But of course, the story doesn't end there. I wanted to throw on a set of 33-inch tires, so I did that and got lots of tire rub. So next came out the Sawzall. So you can see in this picture I trimmed the fender all the way around, and what I trimmed actually is covered by the factory fender flare. You can see some extra holes on there. I was going to try a different type of flare, but never did go that direction. But the real important part is in the actual footwell of the floor. The seam is where Ford puts the body pieces together, and it is pinch welded together there. There's the inner fender well, the plastic liner that goes around that pinch seam, and that's where the tire would hit. So I cut that plastic inner fender away to get at that seam, thinking it might give it clearance, but no, it didn't. So you basically have to take a hammer and pliers and whatever you can do and fold that seam flat to give clearance. And you know, I hammered on it pretty well to get the clearance I needed, but it folded over nice and didn't seem to affect anything on the interior. When you pull out that inner plastic fender well, you'll notice that Ford puts a sound deadening piece of foam behind that fender in the door opening where the hinges are. I'm assuming that it keeps some sound out of the interior. So I cut a piece of plastic I had laying around and I fitted it to that opening perfectly to keep that piece of sound deadening material in there, and also mud will fly right up in there and end up inside the door hinge, which is bad for those in the long run. I did a whole bunch of clearancing in there, trimming. You don't have to do that. If you're prepared for a little bit of scraping when the wheel is at full lock, it'll be fine. I don't really think it'll tear up a tire, but I did that because I go off-roading a lot and didn't want to have any issues. As well, to close this out, building this Explorer was really cool, and there's a lot of other things I did to it to make it off-road worthy. The performance of this machine was amazing. The stock limited slip was a little bit of a problem off-road, but the wheelbase and the clearance and the turning radius works really well. I did take the shackles off and go with a F-150 leaf pack swap. That's for another video. And that pretty much finishes it up. Hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for the next installment in Stark's Expeditions.